catching. So this is where me and Jake kind of sit back and just listen here, and we let Adam and Ronnie and then our special guest Matt Cross plays in the Oakland Athletics organization. He just absolutely demolished the athletes version of this. So I'm excited to hear what he's got for the coaches and some drills that we can give to some of our athletes during this time for them to be able to do. I really like that drill, Matt, that you were given at the end about the bottle drill, something that you can do at home sitting down with zero ball, zero glove, any of that. I'm just working on your form, and I know Adam and Ron, you guys got a lot of good stuff in this sector too. So I'm excited just to sit back and listen and hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing with your catchers. And even if we don't necessarily work directly with catchers, it's always good to have a little bit of that knowledge of what they're doing and how they're stealing strikes, because now maybe we can take that into our game or our teams, or we can look for that on the base paths as well, see some things that they're doing, pick up some tendencies, a bunch of different things. So Ronnie, I'll let you kind of get into it. I'll let you run it with Matt and Adam. You guys do your thing, and I'm excited to listen in, man.
Yeah, so I'll just start it off kind of simple. I actually want to hear a lot of what Adam does with his youth guys and kind of how they develop their process and everything like that. I definitely want to hear a lot about what you guys are doing. But at least at the hot corner side of things, I was fortunate enough this year to have two professional catchers that trained at our place. I didn't really do any catching work this year. The only catching stuff that I know of that I've done is really with those two guys. So when they weren't training other athletes and we were working together, that's kind of really the only time that I saw them. But I'm starting to see that the catching world is changing a little bit. I'm starting to see that there's a lot of adjustments being made to it. In the past, it was always, if you go to one knee, you're a lazy catcher, get off your knees, get into a primary, secondary position. And now it's starting to transition into they actually want that because we're able to get some lower pitches. And I'll let those guys elaborate on a little bit more. But I do want to spend a lot of this time to talk about how we can develop catchers from 9 all the way up to 18. What are we doing with our 9-year-old guys, and how are we developing them up all the way up to 18 years old? I think that our process and the way that we've done it with the high school kids is very good. Just because Matt and Charlie are both at the similar ages to the high school kids, so they're able to connect with them really well. And the younger guys is definitely a challenge because we're trying to get that mental side of it in there and ingrained into them as well. But Adam, I'll kind of let you get into what you guys do from the BAM side of things, 9 to 18, and then we'll kind of get into what Matt does as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned this in the players Zoom meeting, but I'll mention this as well. Just kind of the kickoff speech that we always give to our kids when they're coming in, even if it's at a young age group, like an 8 or 9 level, all the way up to the high school, is to get them to understand what the goal is of being a good catcher. Like, what does an elite catcher look like? What are the skills that they're good at? It's not about just being the biggest, strongest person out there, but it's like, what can you do? What do the skills mean as far as being a good catcher? And the point I try to get them across is that you need to be good at all 3 things. And those 3 things are receiving, blocking, throwing. But you need to be good at those things, in my opinion, in that order of importance. And the reason for that is you'll see varying numbers of this kind of analogy, depending on which ones you search. But the numbers that I'm going to spit out here, I think, are pretty accurate. I try to let our catchers know that 88% of all balls that are ever thrown to them in their catching career, all they're going to do with that ball is catch it and try to present it well to the umpire to get the call that we want. They're going to present balls that are in the strike zone to not lose them, and they're going to try to occasionally steal pitches that are outside the strike zone to be able to get those to be strikes. I always let our catchers know, the analogy that I use is I like to tell them that, like, hey, we are illusionists in a sense, to where we want to trick the umpire a little bit, but we're not magicians. We can't make magic happen, okay? So when you're trying to teach your young catchers and work with them, letting them know that you can try to steal a pitch occasionally to try to get more strikes for your pitcher, but don't be doing massive movements. It's slight movements back into the strike zone when the ball is slightly outside of the zone to be able to steal those pitches. But beyond that, when the ball is in the zone, making sure we're doing a good job of not losing those strikes and we're being as presentable to the umpire as possible. So 88% of the time, that's what we're going to be trying to do with the ball. 8% of the time, we're actually going to block the ball. So, yeah, it's important to be able to block. We don't want pass balls. Those give up free bases and everything. So becoming a good blocking catcher is a big deal, because 8% of the time you're going to do it. And then the other thing I let them know is that only 4% of the time are you going to actually catch the ball and try to throw a runner out. Now, I don't tell them that to diminish the necessity of being a good throwing catcher, because oftentimes that's going to be a big recruiting factor. It's one of the bigger plays in the game to be able to throw a runner out. And it's really important to have a great pop time, a quick release time, and be able to get the ball down there as fast as we can. but to understand that, mainly to get them to understand that practicing receiving as a catcher is probably one of the more boring things that you can do in baseball and softball, but it's the most important thing in my mind, and to work with younger catchers on, is to teach them those proper things. And we'll get into the setups here later on specifically, but we will really try to work on giving young catchers a good base to start from. And just like everything else we've talked about with fielding, with pitching, with hitting, it's about being in a good athletic position. We're trying to keep them low into the strike zone. So not only is their glove low to be able to get that low strike, but also it allows their eyes to see the bottom of the strike zone better, as opposed to being really high up. Ronnie hit on it in the first class, that a lot of times when catchers that are young get into their secondary stance, they stand up too tall and it brings their glove up. Not only does it do that, but it brings their eye level up as well. And oftentimes, especially in youth sports, the umpire's eyes will replicate what the catcher's eyes are doing. So if your eyes are up and your body posture is up, the umpire is going to do the exact same thing, because they don't want to get hit. So if you can find ways to be down in the strike zone, working low into your primary and working into a comfortable one knee position, whether it be left knee or right knee, that's going to be a good thing for your catcher to be able to do, to start introducing those things and get out of this mentality of, that's the lazy way to go about it. It's an effective way to be able to make your pitchers look better than they are. So that's a big thing that we do, and that's kind of how we start. I've got some cool drills that I think that we have kind of come up with that have helped our catchers become better at receiving. And then also, I mentioned it in the first class as well, I feel that one of the hardest things to pick up on for youth catchers, or in baseball and softball in general, is the recognition of ball in the dirt versus ball in the air. So that mentality of, I got to receive before I block, or I got to block before I receive, and being able to do that well. We've got some good drills that I think help speed that process up and allow for catchers to be able to recognize balls in the dirt quicker. Obviously, it's a lot of reps, but we got some drills that I want to share later on. But that's kind of how we started out, making sure our catchers are in a good position, making sure that they're comfortable back there. Because if they're uncomfortable and they're off balance, they're going to lose strikes, and they're not going to be able to pick up strikes, and that's a big deal for us.
Right. So I'll kind of let Matt get into it too. So for instance, I know the fundamentals, you guys, obviously you guys go through fundamentals all the time. When you and I were training all winter long this year, it was, hey, I'm going to do blocking today. Okay, perfect. Let's work on straight blocks. Let's work on side-to-side blocks. Let's work on one knee blocks. And we kind of hit everything fundamentally. But when we're talking about youth athletes, what do you think is the biggest thing that these young guys that you see kind of deficient, things that you had to really work on as you got older? But what are some things that you see with the younger guys that you think they should really, really focus on from the time they start catching?
Repetition, for sure. Repetition. Once you start doing these drills, you can have 1,000 drills, right? And you can just blow through these drills. But if you're not doing this to a perfection or to a T, then why are you doing them?
Right.
You want to have every movement of your drill be perfection. Obviously it doesn't come overnight either. It doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 2 years. It takes a long time. Catching's not easy. I'd say the catchers are the biggest athletes on the field. You're down in the squat every single day. You have to block. You have to take balls to the face, chest, forearms. You have to receive hard pitches. It's just getting them used to that. They got to get used to catching, blocking, throwing out. It's the repetition of keep doing stuff and perfecting their skills, tweaks at a time.
So I think trying to put them in an environment where they're going to see a lot of this stuff more. Like I know from a catching, whenever I caught, I think the biggest challenge for me was when I played shortstop. Yes, I had a lot of responsibilities, but I didn't have to call pitches, and I didn't have to worry about if the guy was going to spike a fastball, and I didn't have to worry about if the guy was stealing. I just knew I had to be at shortstop. How can we put them in? I know games are the best, are obviously the best to do that. But from a practice setting, how can we – is it just a focus thing, but how do we get them to kind of put themselves in that same situation more often? Because, okay, so for instance, you were saying this in the last group of when the hitter stands in the batter's box, you look at him. You want to see if he's tall, if he's down, if he's too close to plate, if he's far off, if he's forward, if he's back. You want to know what he did in all the other at-bats. Is he trying to yank off baseballs and crush baseballs down the left field line, or does he have a pretty balanced and controlled swing? How are we going to attack this guy? what can we do, and what do you guys do? And this is something that I don't even know the answer to this, but what do you guys do in the A's organization to put yourselves in this environment as much as you can? Not just catching bullpens and not just playing games all the time, but like, what do you guys do to put yourselves in those environments consistently?
So we have, during our bullpens, we'll have a guy stand in, and we'll actually call pitches while he's standing in. So he's not hitting, obviously. It'll just be a guy standing in. We can see how he is. Is he a righty or a lefty? We actually do play practice games a lot, which that gets us really good for the games. But also my catching coach is really big on video. So we'll go in the video room at least, I'd say 4, maybe 5 times a week. And we would just go and see why we are calling these pitches, when we're calling these pitches. And it's just the repetitiveness of getting our minds in that game situation instead of, just keep practicing all the others, all of the catching, blocking, all of that. But if you just have a guy stand in and then have the pitcher or have the catcher call the game, like call the bullpen instead of just a pitcher, fastball, just going through the motions, I think that's probably the best thing without it being a game.
Right.
And what we do in our facility in that situation is I like to do catching in group settings. Like individual work's awesome, and you can really focus on the catcher's individual skills. You're trying to work on some of the little idiosyncrasies that they maybe happen with their, receiving, blocking, or throwing. But I absolutely love trying to get catching groups for an hour long that have at least 3 people. And when we do that, we try to do, Ronnie, like you talked about it yesterday with some, I think it was yesterday with some of the pitching stuff, about like it's important when a pitcher is going in the bullpen to not just go up there and throw for 30 minutes, but go through at bats, right? Take a break like it would be an inning after you get 3 outs, and then start over again. We do some stuff along the same lines as catchers. If your catcher's working on receiving, we want to get a lot of reps in, but also work on some reps where they're actually calling the pitch. They're working into their setup. They're working on giving their target, and they're working on receiving the pitch and getting it back to you. And when we have groups of catchers, I love having 3 guys, because when we're doing that, I put 1 catcher in the batter's box so that the catcher can see it from the hitter, can see it with the hitter. And I also put a catcher back there being the umpire. And the reason I love putting catchers in both of those positions is because it really forces home the idea of some of the skills we're working on, to see good catching from a hitter's perspective and how good receiving can steal pitches. And like I asked the catcher, I'll throw a pitch that one of our catchers steals well. And I'll ask the guy that's standing in the batter's box, I'm like, would you have swung at that in a game? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, based on how well he received that, we might get that call. So now they're seeing as a catcher from a hitter's perspective, how important it is to have those good receiving skills. And then I love to have them stand back there as an umpire so that they can get a perspective of the guy they're trying to fool and what they're actually seeing, right? So if you guys are working as coaches with catchers, individual work's great. But if you have multiple kids that are, even if they're different age groups or different teams, trying to bring them in and having hour-long sessions with heavy intent, heavy work, making sure, like Matt said, really focused on those, on the intent and the perfection of those drills. We like to do, like for my sessions, I like to do a good 20 to 25 minutes at the beginning of good receiving work while one guy's doing a lot of med ball work for mobility and another guy is doing maybe just some good transfer stuff for his throwing mechanics, but then also putting a lot of reps on the receiving, and then rotate those guys in and out. And then for the last 5 minutes, bringing those guys in and rotating from catcher to hitter to umpire so they can see those perspectives. And then we work on maybe blocking for the rest of the half of the day or throwing for the rest of the half of the day. So I think it's a big thing for your catchers to do is stand in there as a hitter and stand in there as an umpire so they can really see what this looks like and the ultimate goal of that. It helps them understand, the process of good receiving, the process of good blocking from those perspectives.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think that having all of your catchers or all of your players kind of go behind the plate at some point is very, very important for learning the game. Number one, like learn it, understand what's happening back there, but also understand the grind of it. You know what I mean? And I'm just thinking about this too because I never really caught my whole life until I had to my final year in college, and going back there, I vividly remember saying, wow, this is a lot different. I can actually see everything. You know what I mean? And so being back there and actually having the understanding of you really are totally in control. I think that the best leader on your team's got to be your catcher. I mean, you could put him at shortstop too, but I think one of the best leaders on your team should be behind the plate. Communication-wise, relationship with the whole team, I think is huge. Being able to actually manage they're the game manager. They're the general on the field because the coach isn't out there. And I said this in the last group, and I'll say it again in this one, is I really think that the catcher actually sees a lot that happens in the game more than the coach does. A lot of times, if you have a really good catcher that actually is kind of intent and focused on the game, which they should be because the ball's coming at them every time, but they're going to see a lot more during the game than the coach is going to, because like we said before, the coaches are so focused on 1,000 different things that catcher might see, the 4-hitter comes up and he's late on a fastball, but he might hit a single his first at bat because he's a good hitter, but he's late. So the catcher should feel comfortable coming back to the dugout and saying, hey, coach, we take so-and-so out off the mound. Let's put somebody in that throws a little bit harder because at least we know that we'll get their 4-hitter out or their best hitter so we can get through the rest of that game knowing that they're going to have to beat us with their other guys. And I think that dialogue and those conversations are huge. And then also just having the catcher have a good relationship with his pitchers. I mean, I think every catcher needs to know what every pitcher is capable of doing, what their pitches look like. I remember for me, I caught the same 4 or 5 guys the whole year. And I remember that if a guy didn't have his slider, I knew from the first 5 warm-up pitches that he threw that day in his bullpen that he didn't have his slider. So our conversation immediately after his pen when he was getting ready to pitch was, hey, I know you don't have your slider today. How are we going to beat this? How are we going to beat these guys? What are we going to do today that's going to get these guys out? And I think that conversation is big. And you can even start that at the youth level. Like you can even say to your younger guys, like, if you're going to let them call pitches, like, hey, the pitcher might like to throw to his arm side a lot. He might miss to his arm side a lot. So that catcher and that pitcher should have those conversations together of where do you like to throw your fastball? And where do you want me to set up? And how do you want me to set up? Because I think that if a lot of pitchers and catchers start to have that camaraderie in those conversations, then you get a lot more out of your team because at least the battery part of the game is taken care of and all the other stuff we can handle otherwise. So Matt, I guess the question for me is, how many bullpens do you catch? How many guys do you catch? How many guys do you know? Do you know if guys have certain pitches that they like to go to? Is that something that you have to handle, or is that something that the pitching coach handles and you have to talk with him? Like, how do you kind of gain all that information? How long does it take?
So I went down there for a week and I caught 50 guys in just 1 week. And it was probably like 10, maybe 8 a day or something like that. I mean, spring training is crazy. There's, I don't even know, 200, maybe 250 guys that are pitchers. And it's just all levels. You have to know every single one of them in case you go to a live AV or a live sim game or an actual sim game. And then during regular games during spring training, because the worst thing that you want to do is go into a game and be like, wow, I don't know this guy. I don't know what he's got. I've never talked to him before, but that's happens sometimes. But you got to learn quick. You got to see what is going on. You got to have that understanding of, okay, it doesn't look like his slider's there. You know what I'm saying? And you just got to adapt to that. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, plus from a younger age, they have like what I'd say 5 main pitchers on the team. And so that's easier to get used to those guys. And you're going to start like knowing what pitches they throw, what consistency they have, or if they're on, if they're off, it's 10 times easier for that. So it's just getting to know those guys and catching them every single time.
Yeah. So I have a question for you too, Matt. Like, what in your mind is the quickest way to get on a pitcher's good side? Because I think there's a lot of catchers that may catch in games because the pitcher says that's the catcher I want to throw to. So I think when the Cubs were, trying to sign John Lester, I'm assuming that part of that conversation from Lester's side was like, if you want me, you got to get David Ross too, because he's the only guy to throw to, right? So what's the quickest, in your mind, if a pitcher wants to throw to you individually, why is that? What is it that a pitcher likes about a catcher that makes him want to throw to a certain guy over another?
I trust.
Yeah.
Once bullpens and everything happen, trust is a big thing. If you can block during a bullpen, that's amazing. If you can frame everything during a bullpen, you give them confidence during a bullpen, you catch a pitch, hey, that was a great pitch right there. Good job. Do it again. That's probably the biggest key is talking to them, letting them know how they did. brutally honest with them. If they suck during that bullpen, don't be afraid to be like, oh, you were good. No, you were terrible. Listen, you got to work on your curveball. It was bad. To be like, oh, thank you. Thanks for being honest. If they can't handle the truth, then we're probably not going to be a baseball player.
Yeah, I think Ross is probably the only one that could go up to Lester in his face and tell him, hey, you suck today. I don't know if anybody else had the
That's what I'm saying.
I was brave enough to do that. But yeah, and I think that's a big part of it is they got to be able to, when you're talking to your coaches, you're talking to your young catchers, pitchers have got to have confidence in their ability to block a ball when they throw an off speed in the dirt. You know what I mean? Like as they start developing that skill and getting pitchers to understand that, hey, not every single pitch that we throw is supposed to be a strike, So, getting a catcher to have the ability to be able to block those balls in the dirt when they're called, and being able to make a pitcher's stuff look better than it is on an off day. I think that is a big way to help make sure your catchers are getting noticed. Because Jake mentioned it last class, we were talking about workload, about how, in the olden days, might have catchers that are going to split 50-50 games, right? Like you may not have that because you might have 4 out of 5 guys on your staff that said, I want to throw to that guy. And there's a reason because of that. And that's why I want to hear you talk about that. It's like that trust level of, he's making me look, he's getting more strikes in this game than maybe what I deserve, or he's not letting balls get back there. And if I, do a bad job of holding a runner on, he's going to be able to throw that guy out. I think that is a big way to make your pitching staff better overall. You can have a great pitching staff, but if you have a bad catcher back there, they're going to look worse. So I love to hear you talk about that aspect of, what makes a pitcher want to throw to a guy, because I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, also, I would also say the relationship between on and off the field too. If you have, say, if you're catching a guy and you have a good relationship on the field, but you never talk to him off the field, then all you got is baseball. I mean, you can build that relationship off the field also and not talk about baseball and being closer to one another, and that's another trust thing. I think trust is probably the biggest thing, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually talked about that in our podcast today about, teams that come together, and this goes to pitching and catching too. I think that teams that come together are the ones that actually like each other off the field.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when it comes from a pitcher-catcher standpoint, like you guys are actually really close, but what happens if that guy doesn't trust to throw his breaking ball in the dirt with 2 strikes with a runner on third base because he doesn't know if you're going to block it or not? Like that actually goes further than just baseball.
Way further.
That's going to go off the field too. And I think that having some team camaraderie and actually bringing those guys together is big, because then when they see you grinding back there, they're going to be like, oh man, Matt worked hard today. He was working hard. He's got bruises all over his arms. He's grinding. He's dirty. He's wet. He's soaking wet. He's sweating the whole time. They're going to actually appreciate that a lot more if they like you. And I think that that's a big thing too, because you are grinding and you are going through a lot back there, but just making sure that they care about you and understand that, I like you more as a person than I do just a baseball player, I think is a big deal. To kind of go into some drills, I mean, we drill the crap out of our guys. We do a lot of receiving stuff. We do a lot of blocking stuff. We do a lot of mental blocking stuff, which we talked about in the last group. A lot of transfer and footwork stuff. But Adam, I want to go to you first and just kind of figure out, like, what do you guys do drill-wise? I know for the younger guys, like the 9U guys, it's just getting them stronger, right? Just getting them to kind of understand, how to receive and how to create momentum with their glove to actually be able to stick pitches without dropping it out of the zone. But talk about some of the drills that you guys do at the younger levels that you can kind of build them up with.
Yeah, and this might help answer Steve's question here in the chat a little bit. So big things that I focus on, and I'd love to hear, Matt, your take on this and kind of what they're teaching at the big league level. So big things I focus on for kids as far as like right off from receiving. We always start with some bare hand stuff. There's going to be all of our catchers have a receiving progression that they go through before they do anything catching at all. Even if the primary goal today is to work on our release and our pop time, you're going to do your receiving progression first, because to me, in my opinion, that's the biggest part of the game for a catcher. So we always start off with receiving stuff, then we start off barehanded. And I love I wish I should have came more prepared with some examples of some baseballs here, but we always work on catching that ball in these fingers right here, trying to avoid the palm as much as we can. If I hear a clapping sound when you're catching the ball in front toss, like that's a problem. You know what I mean? I want to hear very quiet fingers catching that ball here, to try to work on catching that ball in the pocket. So Steve, that might be a thing. He might be doing a great job of catching him barehanded, but if he's catching with his whole hand and not focused on the fingers, right? Yeah, you might. Good. Yeah, you got some stuff here for that. Yeah. and working on, like, he's got the different positions here as well. Like in this video, it looks like this guy's in a one knee situation, starting off, with that hand low, just like this catcher is, and working to bring the hand up with timing. Like, one thing I see a lot with catchers for this pre-pitch movement is we'll start working on bringing that hand below the ball to come up to catch it. And a lot of times catchers will bring their hand up way too early, and it completely defeats the purpose in my mind of they'll bring their hand up and then wait on the ball to get there. I want to have that hand below the ball, I think, as long as we can, and then come up. And yes, this is another one we do. We put, especially for if you're a younger catcher and they got smaller hands, I'll take a little foam golf ball and I'll put it between their fingers right here, and between their pinky finger and their ring finger. And then they work on catching a tennis ball or a baseball with those two fingers there. And getting them to understand where to catch the ball in their hand, and then also where to center it up. I noticed that catcher was doing slight movements back towards the center of their chest. Again, like I said at the beginning, we're not magicians, we're illusionists, just trying to trick them just a little bit. So these large movements back towards the center of your chest, can't have it. You know what I mean? If the ball's too far gone, we can't try to pull that thing back into the zone, understanding that it's slight movement. So when we do our progression, I tell the catchers that when they're tossing it back and forth, don't hit the guy in the center of the chest every single time on the toss. Make him have to work on timing of getting to, if this is the ball, of getting to the ball before the ball gets there, and then catching it coming in just a little bit. Same thing over here, catching it coming in a little bit. And I know Matt's going to talk about a drill. He talked as far as a water bottle drill. But for me, I'm a big believer in having the pocket being exposed to the pitcher as long as possible. So when you bring your glove out of the zone or you bring it down, having your thumb at a 3 o'clock position, and then, as you bring it down, bringing it down to maybe a 6 right here, my pocket's still exposed. So if you see the pocket's still exposed and I'm coming up like this, and you'll see a good representation of this in a second when Matt does his drill. But having that pocket exposed and then coming up into the ball, catching it, and then presenting it back with your thumb at a 3 o'clock position. Those are the things we try to harp on quickly, right, to be able to teach the kids the right way to catch the ball, because it's not – it sounds simple. You know what I mean? Like Jake and Byler were talking about before this, like, and I'm not talking about catching, because to me it's just catch the ball. Like, there's a science to it. There's an art to it of really, the right places to catch it in there. So, Steve, maybe that answers it. If the glove's broken in well, work on and see where he's catching it in his fingers. Like, I think that's a big deal. And then obviously setup is another situation here. I'd love to hear you guys talk about, obviously the difference between, the one knee setup and the other ones is obvious. It gets you lower in the strike zone. But I oftentimes have catchers say, hey, when am I supposed to do each one? You know what I mean? I'd love to hear you guys' perspective on that. But at least at a young age, that's what we try to get across, strengthening, the plyo balls or the heavy balls, hand on top of the ball, drop it, catch it a bunch of times in a row to help strengthen that up. But I love this video you got here. This is a great representation of all those things I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. And I'll let Matt – so Matt and Charlie are actually the two guys in the video. Matt was the one that was in the last one. But Charlie, who's in the Twins organization, they teach the one knee setup. And I know we can get into this for hours and hours about the one knee versus primary, secondary. But you see with Charlie, he's kind of doing what Adam's 3-6-3 model is. So he's showing the glove at 3, and then he's actually relaxing down to the ground. And you can actually see that when he receives it, there's a very slight movement that you can actually see for him to go back to his chest. But the one thing that makes this is where the science comes into it, is you can see that he actually beats the baseball to the spot. So the movement to bring it back to the middle is very, very subtle. And I like this one where we kind of zoom in here, where you can actually see brings it right back to the middle of his body right there. But that movement is subtle. His eyes and his head are very still. You can see his body's not really moving at all. So that pitch looks a lot better than if he was just go and stick and receive that as far outside as that one was. And we're doing an outside receiving drill right now. So you can actually see that when he catches it, he's working outside of the ball, he's working around it, and he can actually bring that back into a good position here. So I think those are really good drills that we do. We do a lot of stuff with our guys about talking about, touching the ground and coming back up. But Matt, I wanted to get your, first off, your perspective on that kind of receiving stuff. And then also the stuff that you do with the water bottle drill that guys can do at home. I think that's good.
Well, here's the water bottle. So the 3-6-3, I think that's like a perfect representation of this, is where you go here, boom, as you're going down to receive this thumb is going down also and making this pocket. So 1 second. Actually, when you're going down, I'm actually catching it right here. My thumb is going downward. I'm getting it into the pocket. And once that's happening and I catch it, I'm bringing it back up. So it's a boom right here. Nice and fast, nice and easy. Thumbs under it. I can put it anywhere. I can put it around here, get around it this way. Do it at home, do it for hours. That's it. But also the receiving, same thing, set up. I like to set up lower, so it gives the target lower. Plus, I want to work from the ground up always. I always want to get underneath that ball. I always want my thumb. If I could, ready 1 second. If I could get a baseball somewhere.
It's a nice gaming chair.
You like that? If I could get my thumb under it and have my thumb actually or not even close it, but the ball is literally just sitting there. The way that it moves up and through and I present it like straight across like that, it's more of like an opportunity, I feel, to getting like stealing that strike. You know what I mean? Yeah. So always working down, up, through, everywhere. Inside pitch, I want to get that thumb down, boom, working through. Outside pitch, it's just that slight movement back to my chest.
Now, Matt, I know a lot of people were taught to do this thing. I was actually taught that a couple years ago. So what's the reason why you wouldn't teach this and you want to teach more of getting down here and bringing it through? So what's the reasoning behind that? What's the purpose behind it? And do you think that you can actually get more strikes going that way? Like, why wouldn't you teach to get around it this way to work back in?
All right, so I don't know. Can you guys see that? No. See the pencil right there? Okay.
Yeah.
Pencil is the corner or is the edge of the plate, right? And now if I come around this ball and I catch it like this, that could go as a ball or a strike because that is so borderline on that edge of the plate. If I come around here, that's a strike. I have my whole width, strike, all the way to here, strike. I could have caught this ball right here if I wanted to, actually, and I could have presented it right there. My pocket is still right over there, but that guy behind me doesn't know it. Right. So I'm actually receiving this, and I'm actually still flat with it. Obviously, it doesn't – no one's going to catch it like this. Hopefully not. But if I can present it to where it's full and I got the full view, full plate, I can go to the very edge, and I could still say that's a strike. This is so slim, and it's so trying to be so precise, and you don't know if it's a ball or strike half the time.
Yeah, and like the way that I explain that to our guys to get them that across, because coaches, I know this if this is new to you, I completely get it. Because like 3 years ago, I mean, I had seen guys in college, teaching, like as you're giving your target, always having this L right here, and having the pocket up like this. I'd still seen guys doing that. And so the way that I explain this to our guys is like if you're going to catch a pitch down the middle, and it's like the absolute perfect pitch, like how would you show that to the umpire? You'd show it like this, right? Like you catch it, you stick it just like that right down the middle. If you're going to catch a ball right down the middle, that's what it would look like. And I like to try to get our guys to work back to this position as much as possible. And it's so much easier to work back to that position by doing that thumb down like Matt's talking about and get back to that quicker, as opposed to catching a ball this way and doing this. The more of that, like it's slight manipulations, the more of that an umpire sees, like the more, they're going to think it's a ball. Like I saw some videos of, everybody always makes fun of Angel Hernandez and how bad he is. I saw some videos of 3 years ago when Gary Sanchez was, probably at the worst receiving state of his career. And he would catch a ball sometimes down the middle, like outside of his frame of his shoulders. And he was doing it with a massive glove movement and it was right down the middle. And everybody would rag on Hernandez about missing the call. And I'm like, it doesn't look like a strike based on the way he's catching it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a big deal. Like, it's about gaining strikes that aren't in the zone, but also not losing strikes. And at a young age, that's a big deal. And, getting kids to not catch the ball and move it out of the zone. That's why I think this movement teaches kids to get into the baseball a little bit and then finish in that good. This is a much stronger position for your elbow, for your shoulder, and your forearm than this is. You know what I mean? Like this feels way weaker to me than this, when I'm catching the ball. So that's at least how we explain it. I think it helps kids get it across a little bit.
I also think where the pre-move comes in too. Like I think for younger guys, you have to have that relaxation phase to generate momentum through your catch. I think for a lot of times we got these catchers that stand here very, very stiff, right? I'm bringing out the old school mitt here, but we got these catchers standing here very, very stiff and they try and squeeze. Right? If they have that relaxation where they're going down, they can create momentum through that catch. which I think makes it a lot easier for them to be consistent at sticking that pitch. But a lot of times we just have them stick their glove there, and then when they catch it, they're stiff and they drag and they drop out of the zone. So I think if we actually teach them how to gain momentum, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the infield, right? With the infield, we're actually getting to a spot, but working smoothly, and we'll get into this tomorrow, but working smoothly through our plays. If we stick our glove in the ground and we just stand there, then our movements are going to be very stiff. So I think if we can actually allow the catchers to kind of have that pre-move and teach them at the youngest age to have that, I think that that's big. So I know that we want to get into a little bit of blocking, transfer footwork, and the positioning kind of stuff. So I'll kind of start that with the blocking stuff. So some organizations professionally don't really put a huge focus on blocking. I think that's because a lot of the pitchers are a little more consistent. Matt's organization is very big on blocking. They take that very seriously. But when do you guys, like for BAM, when do you guys start teaching blocking with your guys, and how serious are you about it? And what are kind of your philosophies within blocking and how you guys go about that?
I'm very serious about it, mainly because I think at a young age, it's like you said, professional level, they're going to be a lot more accurate. There's going to be maybe fewer times that the ball is in the dirt. Younger age groups, they're going to be more wild and everything. But it's also, I think, professional athletes are the anomaly, and they can probably, if they didn't want to block, they probably wouldn't have to. They could pick probably 95% of all balls in the dirt just because they're that athletic. Younger age guys, like scooping the ball is a lost art, you know what I mean? And so we want to be able to teach them to, be walls back there and give that pitcher confidence as far as blocking is concerned. But I wanted to show a drill here that I had somebody asking me about of, getting kids at a young age to recognize a ball in the dirt versus a ball in the air and going down and blocking it as opposed to just scooping at it. Like, that is a very long transition. And I've always been trying to come up with ways to make that time, of that transition period be a lot shorter. Like, we can go into the fundamentals of the block and how you want to land and the timing of it and all that stuff. But one way, like, once we teach the kids the proper, what I think are the proper fundamentals of blocking at a young age, one drill that I like to do to help them speed up that process of recognition is having two different balls. And obviously, like, if you're a younger age catcher, blocking can be a little bit of a scary thing. So tennis balls are good. But what I like to do is the difference in size and the difference in color. So what I do for young age catchers is, I'm going to back up a little bit so you can see me, is I take a tennis ball and I take a baseball and I let them know, like, hey, if I throw this baseball, it's going to be in the air. So if you see baseball, you're going to receive. If I throw this tennis ball, it's going to be in the dirt. You know what I mean? So if you see tennis ball, go down and block. So I'll back up. And I have two buckets. I got a bucket of baseballs and a bucket of tennis balls. And I grab a ball from each, and I put my hands behind my back. And I switch the balls around, and then I end up throwing the ball. If I throw the baseball, I throw it in the air so they can receive. And if I throw the tennis ball, I throw it in the dirt so they can block. And they can get comfortable with the blocking because it's a tennis ball. It's not going to hurt. But they also start training their mind to see different things. So it teaches them that not only are they seeing different trajectories, but they're seeing a different size ball and a different color, and it helps them get it right faster. And I've got a few other different ones that I do that with. But I wanted to ask you guys' opinions on what you tell kids to do as far as anticipation, because I've heard I've heard it like literally split down the middle. Are you guys telling your catchers to always be thinking receiving and then react to blocking? Or if they're in a secondary position or whatever, are you telling them to, hey, think the ball could be in the dirt and then react to receiving? Does that make sense?
Yep. Matt, go ahead.
What do you guys do?
Always anticipate that ball being in the dirt, I'd say.
Okay.
If you anticipate that ball being in the dirt, then that low pitch, you can still, and you're thinking it might hit, but you're not sure, you can still drop a knee and get down to it. If not, then it's still easy to still get down there and block. But if you always anticipate that ball in the dirt, I don't think you're going to have trouble. If you anticipate that ball receiving and then he snaps a curveball and then it bounces right in front of you and you're caught like this, looking like you're trying to scoop it and the ball goes by you and the dude steals second, goes to third, then you're sitting there thinking, why did I just do that?
Right.
So I was saying ball in the dirt, always anticipate that. But mainly for my level, mainly curveballs off speed like that. For younger guys, every time they don't throw that hard, so every single time they got to try and block.
Okay. Gotcha.
We used to, same thing with defensive plays and infield and double plays. We always expect bad feeds. So our biggest thing is always anticipate a bad feed so the good one's easy. And I think that goes for catching as well. If you always anticipate that they're going to spike it, then it's a lot easier to catch it whenever it's going in the spot that it's supposed to. So that's kind of the way that we talk about it.
Right. I like hearing that because I typically, I honestly, I've taught the opposite for a while, mainly because I didn't want kids to sacrifice good receiving for balls that actually weren't in the dirt. You know what I mean? But I'm going to try to change that up a little bit and work that angle of it a little bit and see if that helps them. Because I have some catchers that, do still, some kids pick up on the blocking in the dirt really well. I got Coach Painter in here, is the dad of a young softball player in our organization, and for her age, she's a phenomenal blocking catcher, an absolute wall for a very, very young age. And so she picked up on it real quick. But we have other catchers that it seems like it's still, it's a longer transition time for them. So I think it might be a good idea for me to try to work that angle, because I've always been telling them, like, hey, receive first so you can try to get good strikes. But obviously at the younger age group, there's going to be more balls in the dirt than there are at the older age group. So maybe it makes more sense to anticipate in the dirt than, as opposed to anticipate in the air. That makes sense.
So I think at least for us, I think if you start with the glove low, I think that helps them already get to the block, and then it's easy to work up into the zone for the strike. If you're starting your glove up super high, then it's going to be a lot easier to drag down. I noticed with myself, whenever I would block personally, if I was anticipating that pitcher was going to throw the ball in the spot and then it happened to be in the dirt, I was always late, even though my glove was leading, right? Even though my glove was first to go, I was still very late with my body, which is okay sometimes. Sometimes you're going to be late, and that's fine. But I felt myself being very late when I was thinking receive first. That was the initial nerves that I had whenever I started catching of, I don't want to get hit with 95 in the face. That doesn't sound right. So, you know what I mean? But once I realized that if I anticipate the slider down, or if I anticipate he's going to spike a fastball, then I can work up through the zone a lot better. And I think that's where I like the one knee down thing, because I think that already puts you in a good position to block, and your glove is lower and you can kind of work up from there. So like I like the one knee down thing. Watching Matt and Charlie do it all winter long for us was very, very fun to watch, because they were already in a position where if they needed to block, they could. And if they needed to, receive, obviously they were already down towards the ground, so they could. But I think that being versatile in that is very important too. So I know with Matt actually plays around with all three, where Charlie only does a one knee. So the reason why I was super excited to have Matt come in here is because he can talk a little bit about the one knee down versus a primary versus a secondary, when to do it, how to do it, things like that. So Matt, just kind of go into that a little bit, because I know this is kind of the new wave of catching, and a lot of people are opposed to it because it looks lazy. But what are the benefits of it? And our colleges and pro organizations kind of looking for that now.
So yeah, my organization has just switched into letting the one knee down actually be a good thing, because our low pitch, we actually have stats on our low pitches, and our low pitches receiving weren't the best. So my catching coach said one knee down when nobody's on base or less than 2 strikes. Or any other position you want to be in. You being comfortable is probably the biggest thing, but when nobody's on base and no strike, and there's not 2 strikes on the batter, that's when you can go knee down. Other than that, if there's 2 strikes, then you got to block in case if it's ball in the dirt, strike or drop third, or a guy on base in case he tries to steal. That is what our philosophy is, but I know that other organizations, they're one knee down 24/7 all the time.
Right. And so that's how it is with the Twins. Like the Twins are primarily they don't do anything but one knee down. Like if you watch their whole organization from rookie all the way through the big leagues, they're one knee down only. They throw guys out from one knee down. I think that's where catching is going, in my opinion, just watching the kind of trajectory of the way it is. I think that's where it's going. I think it's going to save knees. I think it's actually pretty quick. But I like what Matt said about it. When there's nobody on base and less than 2 strikes, do whatever position you feel comfortable that you're going to get a strike called. Nobody's going to steal on you. There's no chance for you to mess up anything. But once you get to that 2 strikes blocking situation, go into your secondary. Any runner on base, go into your secondary, because those are situations that we need to be on our toes and active and kind of ready to go. I like that. I think that the one knee down all the time and throwing from there is super, super advanced. And you have to do it all the time. But I really like how we just allow the athletes to be super versatile in their primary positions, because for me, I was more comfortable on a one knee. I did the one knee before the one knee was kind of a thing, only because it was comfortable for me. But the secondary position, I didn't really like that much, but I had to do it. I think now, from my perspective, I would like to do the one knee all the time, but that's because my hips are mobile. You kind of have to look at what your athletes are like. You know, for me, I have really good hip mobility, so I'm able to kind of get lower. But if you have a kid who's a little bit more stiff, he may have to do the traditional primary secondary because he might not be able to get as low as maybe I can, or a guy like Will Smith of the Dodgers can get down that low, or a guy like Garver on the Twins. So I think that's definitely something to look into for sure. Do you guys have anything else on the positioning kind of stuff?
No, I think that's a big deal to get people to understand that. I think I agree with you. This is, I think, where things are going. And I think you're going to see a lot of people start moving into learning to block from one knee and learning to throw from one knee. Like, I mean, if you just I'm not a Yankee fan, but I love following Gary Sanchez's kind of transition from what a lot of people are saying he's like a horrible receiving catcher to now he's gotten way better. And I like seeing how he's changed his stances, how he's changed his glove movement for pre-pitch and post-catch, and, you know, what he's doing with blocking and throwing now, because they're showing a lot of good drills and a lot of good video of him doing those things from the one knee setup. And, you know, I like hearing you guys talk about it because I'm trying to expand my knowledge on it as much as possible to get that into young kids' minds, because I think colleges are going to start looking for that stuff as well.
This is an example of the one knee down. This is Charlie and the Twins organization. And what's actually funny about that is the catching coordinator for the Twins actually just got the job for the Yankees, and he's the guy that's actually taken over with Gary Sanchez. We just found that.
Great.
So that's why you're seeing such a big change with him, because that's kind of what he does.
Okay.
If you actually watch him catch this one, it'll go through here in a second. But if you actually watch him catch, he's starting with that right knee down, his left knee forward, and then so as he receives, you see how he can kind of pop up through his receiving here. This is kind of the new wave. This is kind of the new wave to catch. This is kind of where you're going to see Gary Sanchez do this. You're going to see the Twins do this. But I do believe this is a very elite movement. I think this is going to be very, very difficult for a lot of guys to create transfer movements from there.
Right.
You know, but if you actually watch, I'll show one from the side view, but if you see it from here, you can actually see that he's starting, like he does have a pre-move. And Matt can talk about pre-move for transfers, but he does have a pre-move because that left leg is already there. And then when he jab steps, it's kind of the same as your traditional secondary position. It's just happening from a more relaxed state. So for him, he's still getting to a really, really good position to throw the baseball, but it's just happening from a more relaxed position. I don't think we can do this with youth athletes. Mm-hmm. I don't think this can happen at the 10 to 14U level at least. I think that once you get into like the 15, 16, 17, you might be able to start to do this. But I think primarily for the youth athletes, the 9 through 14, let's say, you know, they should be doing primary, secondary position. Maybe do some one knee stuff receiving, like Matt said. But I don't think you can transfer like this, you know, until they get older. But I do think this is a good representation of kind of where a lot of the big league catchers are going and where a lot of these guys are doing their stuff. Right. And so I think that's kind of where it's at. But talk about how you guys go through your transfer stuff.
Well, okay. Can you give us your take as well, guys, both of you guys, on when to have the left knee down versus when to have the right knee down? Or do you guys have a preference on those things? I think obviously if you're going to be trying to throw guys out with somebody on base, you know what I mean? In that setup with that, what was his right knee was down and his left knee was up in that video. Is that correct? I think obviously, yeah, that's what you want to do because of the transfer and the footwork to throw guys out. But do you have a time when you're telling guys to do one or the other outside of that?
I mean, for technically receiving, it's way easier to get that left leg out of the way. Obviously, because of that arm, so getting that out of there. So the right knee up, left leg down would probably be best for receiving. And then transfers, since that left leg is going to be your lead leg, and you're going to be able to push off that right leg's going to be down digging into the ground as you push up off of it. And then so when guys are on base, I'd feel like that left leg up, right knee down would be better for that push off. And then for nobody on, right knee up, left leg down for more control of the arm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's big. I know that the Dodgers, they allow their guys to kind of just do whatever works for them as long as it's position. So Will Smith is the kind of guy that when he's on his glove side part of the plate, he'll traditionally have I believe he has his right knee down more, but when he's on the his arm side of the play. I think he has his left knee down more because I think that helps him position himself to get more strike calls and kind of work himself around the zone a little bit. That's kind of what they do. But it really all depends on the flexibility of your guy again. Like, what happens if a guy has better rotation of his hips whenever his left knee is down versus his right knee down? I think that you just have to kind of adapt to each guy. But transfer-wise and pop time-wise and things like that, I know a lot of people talk about arm strength. A lot of people talk about footwork. A lot of people talk about transfer. Like, for the A's organization, what's the biggest thing for you guys? What do you spend more time on? I know that you guys aren't big into long toss, so we can just straight up take out the arm strength away from that right there. But when we're talking about, like, what is your big focus on when you guys do transfer stuff, and what do you guys focus on a lot in that?
So we have what we call our pre-move. So our pre-move, it's kind of tough to show, but our pre-move is when our right or our left knee, before that ball is getting to us, it's dipping in a little bit. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I'll just wait for you. Yeah, there we go. Right there, that left knee dips in. As that dips in, we're starting to get our momentum going towards second base. That's getting our whole body leaning towards second base and getting the push off of our right. As that right knee as that left knee collapse, it creates a little space for you to catch that ball and get your body moving forward. So that's I didn't learn that until I actually went to the A's organization, and then I love the pre-move. It's probably my favorite. Yeah, right. Boom, go down right before. And obviously when you're catching down for a transfer, you don't want to go get that ball anymore. You want to let that ball come to you, so it's an easier transfer from your glove to your head.
Right. I think I see a lot of coaches confuse that move with, like, I see a lot of guys teaching guys to catch and be turning this left shoulder. And I don't think I don't like that as much as I like the left knee drop, because the feet have got to go first there as well. So I think if you're going to be teaching that kind of turn as a coach, teach it from that left knee drop perspective, as opposed to trying to get your guys to catch and immediately turning their shoulders. Because I think that throws off the kinetic chain a little bit. So I like the left knee drop way more.
So I was talking to Nick Hundley, and he's been in the bigs for, I don't know, 12 years, was it? Or 15 years, Nick Hundley. And he said, whenever you want to receive this ball, you don't want to bring it around you. You don't want to bring it around. You're throwing the ball. You're trying to play catch with your hand from 6 inches away. So when you catch that ball and it's in the middle of your chest, you want this hand to be right there, and it's just a slight turn. So once I catch this ball, boom, catch it, boom, right there. Now I can bring it up and throw. Yeah, it's way easier than that. Way easier.
I love the logo on chest protectors, because that's a perfect transfer spot in my mind. You know, letting the guys know, like, that's your power position. I mean, just look at any, like, quarterback, like, that's where they're making that transition. And, you know, like you said, keeping that closer into the body as opposed to whipping it around. Of getting that transfer right there, but next to that logo of your chest with your hand on top of the ball. I love that.
So this is a drill that we did this winter. This is Matt's drill. It's a pre-move, pause, and transfer. So I guess the sequence from the secondary position, you can see that he pre-moves and then he pauses. His next initial step, when he goes to instep, he calls that a jab step. So when he goes to jab step or instep, he's transferring, he's getting it up. You can see that in this position, like, he's starting to deplete, but he's still in a very athletic low position to be able to throw. So by the time he gets up into this position, he's still down. But the ball got up fast. And I think the one thing for us, if we're really going to teach catchers how to get rid of the baseball fast, by the time that left foot lands and hits the ground, our arms got to be up and kind of ready to get rid of the baseball. I think that with a lot of the young guys, sequencing with this is very, very, very hard. But we have a whole process, and Matt can go through this. I mean, I can go through it too, but we go from standing transfers to half kneeling to half transfers, to low transfers, to one knee transfers. We start them at the top so that they can kind of understand from a standing position how to get to where they need to go. And then from there, we start to bring them down into their squat, so they still understand the movement that they need to make, but we make it easy for them at the start because they understand things a lot better when they're standing. So we do a lot of drills like that. I think it's great, but understanding the sequencing of how to throw and when to get rid of the baseball that way, I think is huge. We do a lot of drills with that kind of stuff. A lot of our catching drills that we do are realistically for sequencing, whether it's from a one knee or a two knee, understanding the pre-move, understanding the jab step, things like that. But I know that we only got a couple minutes here, so I'll kind of let Adam kind of recap, Matt recap, and then we can close this up.
No, I love what you just said there about that working from the top to the bottom scenario there. We do the exact same thing of, because I think a lot of people really focus on quick footwork and like the footwork's got to be really fast, right? But then they lack transfer speed from glove to hand. And then it gets too far behind. And then now you're way out on your front side and you still haven't gotten that arm all the way up. So we teach the same thing as like by the time that left foot comes down, your elbow's got to be back, and you got to have that arm up here. So like that's what I love that you touched on that. And we do the exact same thing. We work from top to bottom into the athletic position and try to get that there. So yeah, I think it was a great session, guys. I think if anything, being able to teach kids the ideas of what's most important at their age, you know what I mean? And I think at a young age, it's about getting them in comfortable positions, trying those things out. And allowing them to receive, with nobody on base from what's most comfortable to them. I think they're going to get more strikes. And then, we're going to be posting out tons of videos on, blocking drills, throwing drills, and, more great receiving drills. And, I just think make sure when you're as a coach working with young players, promoting them to be in the most athletic, comfortable position as possible is going to allow them to do all three of those things to the best of their abilities. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, you got anything?
Yeah, just with the transfers again, I was trying to say when you are coming here and you're throwing and you get that transfer, both arms are up. As you're pulling down, this glove side isn't just going to flail out anywhere. Then you're all super rotational, and then your arm's going to put a lot of pressure on itself. So it's glove tuck like pitchers are. Boom, coming through. It just saves your arm. It's a lot more accurate, and I just want to say that I thought this was a great session. Definitely receiving. We got a lot of transfers, or got a lot of receiving, blocking, talk about transfers. That was great.
Yeah, we hit everything. So if you guys have any questions about anything, please let us know. Especially in our area, like I said, we got 2 pro guys that work at our place that are catchers. I was a catcher. We got a guy coming through now that's going to be a high pick in a couple of years. That's a catcher. Adam does a lot of really good stuff with their catchers. So if you guys have anything that you guys need, catching wise, please let us know. We know the old school, new school stuff. So we're here for you guys. Shoot us an email, anything that you guys want, we'll help you out as much as we can. So back tomorrow for infield stuff. So we'll see you guys then.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Yep. See you guys. Great job. Thanks again, Matt. Appreciate all your help, man.
Thank you.